I was halfway through a chapter I didn't really need to reread when I heard her voice slice through the cabin. "Sir, you need to gather your things. You're not supposed to be sitting here." Not loud enough to be a scene, just loud enough that everyone in first class heard it. I looked up slowly. Not because I was confused, I knew exactly where I was sitting, but because I'd learned a long time ago that moments like this reveal themselves if you don't rush them. She stood in the aisle with that practiced smile people use when they're about to do something ugly but want to feel professional about it. Perfect posture, perfect uniform, perfect confidence that she was right. "This section is reserved," she added, glancing at my jacket like it offended her, "for paying passengers." Around us, conversations thinned out. You know that sound, the soft vacuum when people pretend not to listen while listening harder than ever. Someone across the aisle leaned back just enough to get a better look. A phone lifted. Not subtle. I stayed seated. "I am a paying passenger," I said calmly. She let out a little breath through her nose. Not a sigh. A dismissal. "Sir," she said again, slower this time, "these seats are assigned very carefully. There's been a mistake." A mistake. I smiled just barely. Not because it was funny, because it was familiar. See, when people think you don't belong somewhere, they don't ask questions. They write a story in their head and cast you as the problem. And once they've done that, every detail becomes evidence. Too quiet, too young, too casual, too me. She reached for my boarding pass like she already knew what it would say. When she saw it, her smile tightened. She murmured. "These upgrades happen sometimes. Points glitches. It'll be easier if you just move now." Easier for who? Behind her, a man in a blazer cleared his throat like he wanted this over with. A woman 2 rows back whispered something that made her friend snort. I caught the word lucky. That one stung more than I expected. I'd been in high-pressure rooms before. Rooms where a single decision could cost millions. Rooms where silence carried more weight than shouting. I'd learned how to breathe through tension, how to keep my hands steady when everything around me wanted a reaction. But humiliation hits differently when it's casual, when it's dressed up as policy. I could have ended it right there. Could have pulled out what I had in my bag. Could have corrected her, corrected all of them. I didn't, because part of me, the tired part, wanted to see how far they'd go when they thought no one important was watching. She straightened and tapped her earpiece. "I'll get a supervisor." That's when things escalated. He arrived fast, confident stride, authority baked into his voice before he even spoke. "What seems to be the issue?" he asked her, not me. She gestured toward me with 2 fingers like I was luggage. "Passenger refusing to move. Seat assignment doesn't seem legitimate." He finally looked at me. Really looked. His eyes flicked from my shoes to my face, paused just a beat too long, then settled somewhere behind my head like he'd already decided. "Sir," he said, "I'm going to need you to cooperate so we can depart on time." I handed him my boarding pass. "I am cooperating," I said. "This is my seat." He studied the pass, then glanced back at her. Probably a system error. Of course it was. I felt it then, that quiet, simmering pressure in my chest. Not anger. Something colder. The realization that this wasn't about logistics anymore. This was about comfort. Their comfort. And how inconvenient it was for them to admit they might be wrong about someone who didn't look like their usual first-class passenger. A phone camera was openly pointed at me now. I could see my own reflection in the dark screen, calm face, neutral expression, eyes a little sharper than before. The supervisor lowered his voice. "Let's not make this harder than it needs to be." That sentence always means the same thing. Make it easier for us. Disappear quietly. Something crossed a line then. Not something he said, something she did. She leaned in toward him and whispered, not quite softly enough, "These kids fake things all the time." Kids. I felt the shift inside me, the moment where patience stops being virtue and starts being permission. I reached into my bag slowly, deliberately. Not to prove anything, yet just enough to remind myself I had options. "Before we go any further," I said, "I need to make a call." She laughed. A short, sharp sound. "Sir, all devices need to be off. We're preparing for departure." "This is an emergency contact," I replied, "and I'm allowed to use it." That part wasn't entirely true, but confidence carries its own authority. The supervisor hesitated. Just a fraction, long enough for me to dial. I didn't announce anything, didn't put it on speaker. I made the call, said one sentence, and hung up. That was it. No drama, no threats, just a process set in motion. At first nothing happened, and I could feel them relax, the tiny exhale of people who think they've won. Then the captain's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing a brief delay. Please remain seated." The supervisor's radio crackled. He turned away from me to answer it, his posture shifting. "What do you mean, corporate?" he whispered. "Right now." Her confidence faltered. Just a hairline crack. Two uniformed officers appeared at the front of the cabin. Not rushing, not aggressive, just serious. The supervisor looked at me, again, really looked this time, and something in his expression changed. The officer asked me for identification. I handed it over. All of it. The cabin went silent in that way silence only happens when people realize they might have misjudged the entire situation. The officer read, then read again. His partner leaned in. They exchanged a look. "Sir," he said, his tone different now, "thank you for your patience." Patience. Behind him I could see her face draining of color. The supervisor had gone pale. Her radio crackled again. This time she didn't ignore it. "Take the call," the voice on the other end said. Sharp. Final. She stepped into the galley. I didn't follow with my eyes. I didn't need to. The call I'd made finally returned, this time on speaker, because I was asked to. A calm voice filled the cabin. Familiar, grounded. "We're aware of the situation," it said. "And we're watching." That was enough. No one needed to say my name. No one needed to explain my background. The system they trusted had spoken for me. The supervisor cleared his throat. "Sir, we apologize for the misunderstanding." Misunderstanding. I looked around the cabin, at the phones, the faces, the people who'd decided who I was without ever asking. "This wasn't a misunderstanding," I said quietly. "This was an assumption." No one argued. I didn't ask for anyone to be removed, didn't demand consequences. I didn't need to. Because shame does something punishment never can, it lingers. The plane eventually pushed back. The cabin stayed quieter than it had been before. Conversations didn't resume right away. People avoided eye contact. A few looked thoughtful. A few looked embarrassed. I opened my book again. Not because I needed to read, because it felt like reclaiming something. 3 hours later, as we descended, I thought about how close I'd come to handling it differently. To raising my voice. To proving myself the moment I was challenged. But the truth is, the most powerful thing I did that day was stay still long enough for everyone else to expose themselves. I walked off that plane without applause, without acknowledgement, just another passenger to anyone watching from the outside. And that was fine, because the victory wasn't public, it was internal. It was knowing that I didn't need to look powerful to be powerful, and that the people who rely on appearances alone are always one quiet moment away from being wrong. So let me ask you something. Have you ever been judged before anyone bothered to learn who you really were? And when that happened, what did it reveal about them? Not you. Tell me in the comments.